In 9.1, we're learning about the midpoint formula and the distance formula. So for the midpoint formula, all you have to do is find the average out of the two x coordinates. To find the average, you add them up and divide by 2. Then you take the two y coordinates and you find the average of those. So that would be 10 divided by 2, which is 5. And 18 divided by 2, which is 9. So the midpoint of those two coordinates is 5, 9. Okay, so for number 2, I add the x's together and divide by 2. I add the y's together and divide by 2. So this is going to be negative 3 over 2, comma 8. Okay, so for number 3, I'm just going to add 2.5 and 7.9. I'm going to take negative 6.1 and add 13.7. So 2.5 plus 7.9 is 10.4. Half of that is 5.2. 13.7 minus 6.1 is 7.6. Half of 7.6 is 3.8. For number 4, they give you the midpoint and you have to find the other endpoint. So they give you the midpoint and one endpoint. You find the other endpoint. So you could do this algebraically. Let's call the unknown point x comma y. So I can do the midpoint for the two endpoints, and I know this has to equal negative 8. And then I could do the midpoint for the y's. Y plus negative 3 divided by 2 has to equal 6. So if I want to do it algebraically, I can solve both of those. The faster way, in my opinion, is think about if you're on this endpoint, to get here, you go down 22. And since I know that's the middle, I have to go down 22 again to get to the other endpoint. So you get negative 30. And if you solve this equation, you get negative 30. All right, for the y's. So for the y's, imagine you're at negative 3. To get to 6, you would have to go up 9. Now from 6, go up 9 again. And if you do that, you're at 15. And if you solve this equation here, you also get 15. So that's a quick way to do it when you already know the midpoint and one of the endpoints. All right, the distance formula is just the Pythagorean theorem. So let's say you want to find, let's say you have 2 points and you want to know the distance between them. So what you would do is basically make a right triangle. Find the x distance, find the y distance, and do the Pythagorean theorem. So how do you find the distance between two numbers? You subtract. And then it doesn't matter if it's negative, because you're going to square it anyway. Then you find the y distance, you square that, and if you think about the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, you have to take the square root of that total, and that'll give you the hypotenuse. All right, so for number 5, I want to know how far apart are the x's. So it doesn't matter what order I subtract them in, because I'm going to square it anyway. So this is going to be 6 minus negative 2, or plus 2, plus negative 6 minus 0 squared. All right, skipping a little bit of the work. 8 squared is 64. Negative 6 squared is positive 36. The square root of 100 is 10. All right, so if you want to do a shortcut, all you have to do is ask yourself, how far apart are these numbers? Those are 5 apart. And it doesn't matter if it's negative because I'm going to square it anyway. How far apart are the y's? Those are 4 apart. So the answer here is going to be 25 plus 16, which is 41, and that's still under the radical. All right, so using the shortcut, how far apart are these? Those are 9 apart. If you want to do all the work, you can. 6 minus negative 3 is 9. Or you could do negative 3 minus 6, which is negative 9. You're going to square it anyway. All right, how far apart are 4 and negative 11? Those two numbers are 15 apart. 4 minus negative 11 is 15, or negative 11 minus 4 is negative 15. All right, 9 squared is 81. 15 squared is 225. So I want to do 81 plus 225. Again, 81 plus 225, that is 306. Let's simplify our radical. So what is 306? 306 is 3 times 102. 102 is 3 times 34. And 34 is 2 times 17. So I see 2 3's. So a 3 can come out. 2 times 17 has to stay inside. So that's 3 radical 34. So again, 2 3's. So 1 3 comes out, the other 3 disappears. 2 and 17 don't have a partner, so those have to stay inside. All right, we are given a rectangle and all the vertices. We need to find the perimeter. And we also have to find the area. So let's find the perimeter first. We know that rectangles have opposite sides that are congruent lengths. So we need to find AB. So the length of AB is, their x-coordinates are 2 apart. So I do 2 squared. The y-coordinates are 3 apart. So the length of AB is radical 13. And we also have to find one of the other lengths, but not the opposite side, because that's also rad 13. So BC, B and C have x-coordinates that are 6 apart and have y-coordinates that are 3 apart. So 36 plus 9 is 45. This is 3 radical 5. So the perimeter will be 2 of these plus 2 of these. So the perimeter will be, and remember that the smaller radicand should go first, 6 rad 5 plus 2 rad 13. And then we also want the area, so we take the product of these two numbers. The product of those 3 numbers would, or 2 numbers would be 3 radical 65. So this one's the perimeter, and this one was the area. We have a map of Florida. We're going to take a trip from Tallahassee to Fort Lauderdale. We want to take a break midway, so let's find the coordinates. This is a midpoint problem. So Tallahassee, looking at the map, has coordinates -5, 7. Fort Lauderdale has coordinates 5, -5. So I want the midpoint of those. So the midpoint would be, if you add their x's together, you get 0. 0 divided by 2 is 0. If you add their y's together, you get 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. So going to 0, 1 on the map, it appears that the closest city to the point 0, 1 would be Land O'Lakes. And now we need to calculate how many miles it is from Fort Lauderdale to Tallahassee. So we're going to do the distance formula. Right, using my shortcut, how far apart are the x's? The x's are 10 apart. And you could even count that on the map. If you went from there to there, that is 10. And if you went the y distance, that is 12. So we're going to do the Pythagorean theorem using 10 and 12. That is radical 244. Now, radical 244 is somewhere between 15 and 16. You guys should know that from one end of Florida to another is not 15 or 16 miles. So the last thing we have to account for is looking at the map, there's a scale. 3 units on the map is equal to 100 miles. So we're going to take radical 244. We're going to multiply that by 100 over 3. Because right now, this is just units on the map. We have to convert that to miles. So this is like dimensional analysis. 100 miles is the same as 3 units on the map. So we're converting to miles. So doing that, we get 520.7. We're told to round to the nearest mile, so 521 miles. All right, that is it for 9.1.